Okay, we're going to continue reading. Again, Gods of the Bible, and we're on page 173. All right, I'll just read the last couple of lines again. The crossbreeding between the two races is reprehensible. The Elohim decides to exterminate humanity with the flood. Noah is destined to restore humankind. In light of what has just been said, consider Genesis 6:9, where Noah is defined as follows. And this is the Hebrew to English translation. Man, fair, honest, among generations of his. Usually this verse is interpreted in purely ethical terms, but certain words allow and in fact suggest the introduction of a different reading. The word tamin in verse 9 means whole, complete, without blemish, without spot, and is used with these meanings several times in the Old Testament. For example, Joshua 10:13 and Exodus 12:5. The verb taman, from which it derives, means to be complete, not missing any pieces. Considering that the forbidden sexual encounters between the gods and the earthly females have resulted in several imperfections and loss of original genetic purity, Noah seems to be an individual whose genetic integrity is being heavily emphasized. He is said to be perfect in his generation. Do his distinctive physical traits show that Noah was essentially different from the rest of the human race, who were no longer genetically as perfect as the Elohim intended? Was Noah the result of an artificial insemination procedure done on Bitnanosh, Lamech's wife? There is another passage in this regard that we would like to highlight, Genesis 6:11. Again, this is Hebrew to English translation. And it was ruined, the earth, in the faces of the Elohim. Pick this up, in the faces, plural, of the Elohim. Again, side note, signifying more than one Elohim. Earth was corrupted. The Etymology Dictionary of Biblical Hebrew reports that the verb's primary meaning is having been irreversibly marred. Moral wrongs are always reversible, forgivable, and restorable. Even the worst sinners can find redemptions if they repent. What happened that was so severe as to be considered irreversible? Had the mixing process reached an irreversible and unacceptable degree? Did the Elohim think their genetic programming work was in jeopardy, hence the desire to erase everything and start anew with a pure seed? The story of the ark, on which all living species are saved, gives us further clues. The Elohim commanded Noah, Genesis 6, verses 14 through 19, to build an ark. Hebrew to English translation, and from each of the living, from each flesh too, of each every you will let enter in the ark. We are pursuing the hypothesis that Noah was considered or even created genetically intact in order to restore genetic purity. Given the logistical difficulty of hundreds of plant species and hundreds of animals living together on a great barge, is it possible that genetic purity was restored simply by preserving the DNA of various species? Did Noah bring the genetic matrices of the various species with him onto the ark? Is this what the ancient authors tried to tell us with the limited conceptual categories and linguistic devices at their disposal? Is it possible that Noah's Ark was a precursor to a frozen ark and Salvard global seed vault projects, which aim to preserve seeds and animal DNA from catastrophic events that could endanger life on Earth? There is no definite and proven answer. At least we don't have one. But the literal meaning of the terms and the logical consistency do not allow us to dismiss the possibility with superficial arrogance. The next subtopic is the tribes of Israel. Biblical authors told the story of Israel, the chosen people, on a clear ideological basis and with the distinctly nationalistic stamp. This goal required the presentation of a coherent and unified political and ethical structure characterized by temporal and geographical continuity. This was the only way to guarantee the uniqueness of the selection that exclusively described them. But have the various authors involved in the text achieved their intention? We will examine only one aspect here and leave a more detailed and comprehensive analysis to future works. We wonder, were there 12 tribes? In Numbers 1, we find a list of representatives of each of the tribes that were to take the census in the desert: Reuben, Simeon, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin, Dan, Asher, Gad, Naphtali. So there are 11 official tribes. The biblical author then divides the tribes of Joseph and forms two, corresponding to his sons Ephraim and Manasseh. The number is again 12. The census, however, does not consider the tribe of Levi, which is also of fundamental importance because of its duties in the direct service of the Elohim. With Levi, the tribes are now 13. We must assume Levi was omitted from the census because the number had to be 12. This trick is repeated in Deuteronomy 33. Moses blesses the tribes and, this time, restores the tribe of Levi in the number but omits the tribe of Simeon. In this way, the number 12 continues to be respected. But why was it so important to respect the number 12? The choice of the number 12 is most likely related to the division of the year into 12 months and the functional necessity of assigning each district the monthly task of procuring food and services for the court in Jerusalem. Each community, in turn, had to fulfill his task during the 12 months. But numbers only occasionally agree. Often, this necessity has escaped the authors themselves. In Judges 1, the tribes are listed in the following order: Judah, Simeon, Benjamin, Joseph, Manasseh, Ephraim, Zebulun, Asher, Naphtali, and Dan. Both Joseph and his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, are mentioned. Still, despite this unjustified juxtaposition, we have a total of 10 tribes, which, if we take Joseph out, becomes 9. But what would then happen to Reuben, Issachar, Gad, and Levi? If we add them up, we would be back to 13 or 14 tribes if we keep Joseph with his two sons, as the biblical author did. The book of Judges offers us another oddity. Chapter 5 is known as the Song of Deborah and is probably the oldest written biblical text. It celebrates the exploits of Elohim and the battle in which the children of Israel are victorious. However, the battle involved only 6 tribes in the following order: Ephraim, Benjamin, Machir, Zebulun, Issachar, and Naphtali. Verses 16 through 18, which turns out to be the later addition, probably made with restorative intent, mention other tribes that the older text did not seem to know: Reuben, Gilead, Dan, and Asher. According to a simple calculation, we then have 10 tribes with restorative insertion. In addition, we have two mentioned names that do not appear in the other list: Machir and Gilead, which might correspond to Manasseh and Gad. Where have Simeon and Levi gone? Can we assume they were victims of the curse imposed on them in Genesis 49, 5 through 7? In these verses, Elohim rages against a particularly violent behavior of the members of these two tribes and predicts their dispersion within Israel. If this is the case, only 10 remain. Further confirmation of the impermanence of numbers and the numerical inconsistency of the tribes is found in 1 Kings 11, 31 and 32. The verses refer to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, a worthy man who served Solomon, who had placed him in charge of recruitment. On a journey outside Jerusalem, Jeroboam meets the prophet Achiai, who informs him of Yahweh's intentions. The Elohim has decided to take Solomon's kingdom and leave him only with one tribe. A symbolic gesture accompanies the news. Achiah tears his cloak into 12 pieces and tells Jeroboam to take 10. The number corresponding to the 10 tribes that Yahweh will assign to him by taking them away from Solomon. The calculation is simple: 10 tribes for Jeroboam, only 1 Judah for Solomon, for a total of 11. The analysis is simple, but it does not add up. The explanation probably lies in the fact that the Hebrews were not only those who had followed Moses out of Egypt, but also, as the oft-quoted Professor Giovanni Garbini writes, the outcast who lived on the margins of society is in an ambiguous position, and that these Hebrews, the Babylonians called them Caribru, were particularly numerous in areas and times of political and social upheaval, such as those that favored the settlement of certain Israelite tribes in Palestine. Moreover, Hebrews hid in the caves and helped Jonathan, son of Saul, in his coup against the Philistine camp. That's 1 Samuel 14:11. That is not all. Naphtali, Gilead, and Zebulun are geographical names for territories annexed to the Assyrian Empire. It is not entirely sure that they belong to the kingdom of the north. Yahweh took advantage of the prevailing confusion and power vacuum that characterized this period to conquer the territory he had his eye on since the time of Abraham. That said, we cannot help but reflect that the uniqueness of the chosen people, its numerical and tribal substance, and its precise and practical division into 12 tribes was perhaps a strongly felt desire of Jewish nationalism than an objective and documented historical reality. The Hebrew people were far more articulate and complex than the nationalist ideology has tried to portray them. This observation should lead to serious reflection on all those schools of thought that build trusts and certainties on numbers: theologians, Kabbalists, esoterics. Entire introspective structures have been built around the number 12 because the number 12 is considered a highly symbolic number. Thus, the 12 had to be there. However, historical reality teaches us that there were probably not 12 tribes. This figure results from a later revision that attempted to construct a solid ideological perspective from an uncertain historical ground. Caution is always advised when attempting to base truths of various kinds on particular texts, theological, Kabbalistic, or more generally esoteric initiatory. The last subtopic is conclusions. We present below the succinct and hopefully clarifying summary what has been said in this chapter. The first Adamite females mix with the sons of the Elohim, the species of creators, thus provoking a violent reaction of the supreme lords who decide to eliminate them. Noah is an intentionally created whole to restore genetic purity to the planet. Noah is the father of Sem, or Shem. The Akkadian Shum, or Sumer, corresponds with the Shem of Genesis 10:21. The children of Shem, i.e. the Semites, could be possibly identified with the children of Shum, i.e. Shumers, Sumerians. From Shem descends Eber, and therefore the Hebrews. From Eber descended Peleg and Abraham. At the time of Peleg, a territorial division is made between the various lords from above. Lords from above. The story of this division is told in Deuteronomy 32 and the other Sumerian narratives. Yahweh receives Jacob's family as property. Therefore, we cannot speak of chosen people, but of different decisions or different types of decisions and selections that took place at different times in history and involved different people. The Bible suggests at least 3 different situations in which a specific person or group has been singled out for a specific goal or purpose. Noah, who was not Hebrew, and all his descendants were chosen because of the Elohim's will to restore the human race and possible genetic purity. The people of the Semites, Sumerians, descendants of Sem, Shem, Shum, were chosen by the Elohim Anunnaki to initiate human civilization's development after the flood. The children of Israel, the descendants of Abraham through Isaac and Jacob, were chosen by Yahweh, assigned to him as personal property. Wow. And go back, over these verses in the Bible, if you guys, if there's anyone who doubts this research here, but it makes so much sense about the gods, these Elohim, different Elohims, and Yahweh just being one of the Elohims, and even a lower ranking Elohim than the others. And the thing about who Elyon is, and the chosen people, the table of nations, and who exactly were these Semites? Were they actually Sumerians? Fascinating. Okay, guys, we're going to end we've ended this chapter, which is chapter 9. And now the next subtopic that'll be on page 179. Page 180, drug-addicted gods. This should be fascinating. I haven't read this chapter yet. I wonder if it's going to have anything to do with the holy anointing oil. Actually, I did a little bit of research. It refers to frankincense and myrrh and I think cinnamon is in it as well. And they also mention the canna. The canna. And there's a strong possibility that this canna flower was actually cannabis. And it would sort of make sense that the priest had to anoint themselves in this oil, not just a drop, but anoint themselves, rub it all over their bodies, and also burn so they get inhale the smoke, so they can become enlightened. We'll see how that goes. All right, I'll see you guys later for the next one, Chapter 10, Drug Addicted Gods. See you guys next time.